each one of us has a very particular relationship style that is rooted in our personality. And what we know about personality and the mechanics of our minds is that each one of us has predominant needs. And these are, again, hardwired into us at the time of birth, part of our personality. They're based on our personality, but they must be met. These needs are really, really critical for us to know, for us to understand, and for us to see how they translate out into our behavior and out into our lives in terms of what causes us to feel satisfied and what causes us to feel dissatisfied. These needs must be met in order for us to grow and to develop into the person that we are meant to be. But most importantly, when we think about it through the lens of our relationships, in order for us to feel satisfied, in order for us to thrive in our relationships, these predominant needs in us absolutely must be met. Okay? And what happens when the needs are not met, it actually causes us to become self-protective. It keeps us living in our imposter syndrome persona and moves us away from really feeling satisfied, absolutely gets in the way of our happiness. So understanding those needs, how those needs translate out for you in your relationships, if you are an artist or an INFP, ISFP, or if you have artists as your second in the relational function, ENFP and ESFP, then this is really, really important for you. Equally, if you are in a relationship with someone who has this style, this is going to give you with some really great understanding about what it is you need to do with them. I'll leave you with some tips today about how it is that you can have really effective relationships with this style. And if this is your style, I'm going to give you tips that you can take away to the people that you are in relationship with, whether it's at home or at work, to really help to improve the effectiveness, the satisfaction of your relationship. Okay? The artist for us is, or the INFP, ENFP, this is about the introverted feeling function. So the introverted use of the feeling function, right? It is in the right emotional brain. That is where this particular function is rooted, and it is all about creating. Okay, so it is driven by a need to be creative. So the function itself is the relational function, the relating function, but the predominant need of this style, of this use of that particular function, the introverting of the feeling function or the relating function, is about the need to be creative. And that's where they're coming in. So if you're an artist, you're coming into your relationships through that place. Okay, so what does that mean? They're driven by a need to create. And so this style, of all of the styles, intense and passionate, okay? Important things to know and understand about them. They seek authenticity, deep, relating, sort of meaningful connections with other people. And really that freedom to be able to express themselves without limitation, without constraint, okay? That ability to really kind of show up and be present as they intend to, right? And again, it comes from the inside, creating of themselves. They attempt very much to create the ideal in their relationships. And they really do prefer independence, doing what they feel like doing, again, rather than having to conform to social constructs or expectations. They really do go after things to demonstrate their uniqueness in their relationships, in their life, in their presentation, in their homes, and everything about it is about that creative expression of themselves. They do seek to be understood, okay, and to be accepted. So while they don't like to conform, they do have that need to feel like they are being accepted and that they are understood, truly, truly, deeply, in a meaningful way understood. And last but not least, this relationship style prefers one-to-one relating. Okay? They like to relate with fewer people and have really meaningful relationships. We talk about that deep bonding that they're looking for. That is very different than the style I talked about last week, which is the socializer, the extroverting of this function, which is much more about connected. It's much more superficial. This is about meaningful, one-to-one relationships and connections. So how does this translate out? So when we think about this style in terms of their relationships, there's a number of things that really characterize and help you to understand if this is someone or the style of someone that you're in a relationship with. They are values-based, and everything is very, very personal. They tend to focus very much on how they feel when they are with another person, and they think about how that other person might be judging them or judging their conversation skills. Should the other person be entertaining and engaging? So they're always referring that judgment against themselves, and the challenge is that they can often see themselves as coming up as lacking, as opposed to really being able to appreciate themselves and for their gifts and their talents. Okay? Again, that predominant need to be creative means that they really do have a pleasant and friendly persona, but with a deep capacity for love and caring. Okay? And they do it with the intensity of their whole being. And they really seek to experience another person loving them with that same intensity. Okay? So it's, again, they bond deeply, they bond authentically when they're at their best self. And it's real intense singular focus when it comes to relationships. Okay? And again, they're trying to create it into what they imagine can be possible. And again, looking for the cues on this one: deep, meaningful conversations. Complex personalities they have here that are both sensitive and passionate, and they need to be able to have that freedom to be who they are in their relationships. They also have a real need to be friends with their mates, okay? And they are very compassionate and can really show their caring. So they're looking for mutual sensitivity in that. They're independent. As I talked about earlier, one of the things that really characterizes this style is that need to stand out, to be unique, to be independent. And that can actually cause them to send out mixed signals sometimes to people, okay? And so it can be really confusing. They don't want to be like everyone else because they prefer independence and authenticity, but then they will angst over what it is they're wearing or what other people are thinking, or because they don't want to attract too much attention and get noticed, okay? So again, there's a lot of sort of energy that goes into and thinking and making up stories and creating things in that process of their relationship. The other thing that you want to know about them is they are idealistic and perfectionistic, okay? And they are the most romantic and the most idealistic of all of the styles. And they love being in love. Right? They spend time dreaming about that perfect relationship, as much time doing that as actually being in one. And they long for this, right? And so they can actually assign or project exceptional qualities onto the people they meet without actually making sure that those factors are there, okay? And so it's really sort of understanding, again, all of their behavior is driven around that need to create. And along with that is that, that need to create that perfect relationship, and they will do anything, and that includes idealizing their partners and often putting them on a pedestal without looking at them realistically, working hard and not actually being able to kind of hold what it is that they need. Okay? And that takes us into the conversation about need dissatisfiers. One of the things that we know about the artists is they're always seeking to create harmony between that inner world and their outer world, right? And so it's trying to understand that if they're feeling kind of out of balance, if they're feeling hurt or angry, they may then try and make others feel the same way that they do, because that then creates that harmony and balance between their inner world and their outer world, right? And so it's a little bit different, right? It's not, we've talked about some of the other styles, the way they shut down and they withdraw. With the artist is that they're going to want the other person to feel and to show that they are feeling what it is that the artist themselves, or the INFP and the ISFP, is feeling, okay? So need dissatisfiers I'm going to talk about, because this is really important. You want to scan your environment to say, hey, are any of these need dissatisfiers present? And if so, thinking about some of the things that you might be able to do in order to address or resolve these need dissatisfiers. Now, again, need dissatisfiers are types of interactions, conversations, activities that you may have with others that actually thwart your ability for your needs, that predominant need to be creative, to get met. And so it makes it really hard for you to experience satisfaction, for you to experience happiness, for you to experience that sense of contentment when some or all of these need dissatisfiers are present. If they are present, one of the ways in which we know that our needs are being frustrated, that these dissatisfiers are there, is we are going to feel more irritated. We are going to feel depressed or angered or frustrated. We're going to find fault in others. We're going to pick fights. We're going to react in a more explosive or defensive way. We may engage, or we will engage in self-protective or what we call non-productive behaviors, right? Because it's a way of getting our need met without actually doing it in a way that is, as we say, above the line and functional. And again, we want to be really conscious of this. So as I talk about these need dissatisfiers, if you are an artist, an INFP or an ISFP, or if you have artist as your second, ENFP, ESFP, you really want to think about whether or not these need dissatisfiers are present in your life. Okay, so first and foremost, when we think about it with an artist, is they do not like to be criticized. Okay, they tend to be unassertive, perfectionistic, and these are things that, and they can be excessively self-critical, right? And always judging themselves as coming up as lacking. And so criticism, even constructive criticism for them, can be seen as can be devastating to the artist style, okay? And when they are subjected to ongoing criticism, they will emotionally withdraw. They can become resentful of their partner, okay? So just being aware of what's the level of criticism in your environment. Are you, being confronted with it? Do you have a partner who's criticizing you all of the time about every little thing? Are you being criticized all the time at work without sort of any objective conversation about it? Because again, remember, harmony between the inner and the outer world is so important for the artist. So if there's a lot of criticism going on out there, there's going to be a lot of criticism going on in here, and then they may move to criticize and judge other people to again bring that all into balance. Don't expect them to conform. Okay, so that's another thing in the relationship. If you expect them to dress a particular way, to look a particular way, to act a particular way, to, all of those sorts of things, if you have your own idea about what the artist should be, then that's going to be really problematic for them, okay? Being just like everyone else actually gets in the way of their need to be creative. And to have that opportunity for unique expression. So value that and appreciate that. If you are an artist and you are not doing that, if you are conforming because you believe that's going to meet the expectations of others, recognize that this is a huge dissatisfier for you. If you're dressing to please others, if you are not doing something, with your hair or your makeup or whatever it might be in order to conform and meet those expectations. And this is where artists' children really have a hard time, especially if they've got socializer parents or stabilizer parents who say, no, this is the way you have to dress, and they don't get provided with the freedom of expression. And I laugh, my son, artist is third for him, but he does have it on his squad. And so his relationship style, and of course, when we're younger, we tend to kind of work a little bit more out of our emotional brain. When he was in grade 3, he wanted to grow his hair long. And he was in a private school where they were not allowed to have their hair past the collar. And in fact, the principal would threaten to kind of go around with scissors if their hair grew past that. And I remember one of the highlights for him when he changed schools in grade 4 was the fact that he would get to grow his hair out long. And much to his father's chagrin, because his father was, sort of more conservative in that. And my son, who's now in his early 20s, has had long hair ever since. In fact, sometimes really, really long hair. And again, that's part of his creative expression. He only ever wears black because that's part of his, again, his creative expression. And with these sort of flourishes, but they're unique to him, and they're all part of his ability to, to not conform, to not do what others expect him to do, and to be really able to kind of live out of his own style, okay? So the other thing that from a dissatisfier perspective that I'm going to talk about is to make sure that you're not focusing on how disorganized they are. So remembering that the part of the brain that this style is rooted in is actually their least developed function is the defining function, where it's about organizing, sort of planning, structuring, right? And so this is going to, create sort of this conflict if you're not aware of that in yourself, again, not if you're this style, not judging yourself for it, but really understanding where it comes from. Artists are process oriented, okay? And so they like to allow things, their days, their weeks, their experiences to emerge, to unfold. And they're not inclined to define goals or to strive to achieve them. Rather, it's like they want to allow life to creatively unfold. And so if you're in an environment where you're being forced in down a particular path or going in a particular direction, or where there's a lot of criticism around how disorganized you are, then again, that's going to be problematic and it's going to undermine your ability to feel satisfied in that relationship or in that work environment. There's nothing wrong with them. Like, this is the thing about all of us. When we understand these things, right? We understand the mechanics of our mind, the way we're actually designed to work and to function, and what we're able to do and what we're not going to be able to do just because of the way our brain is organized. It allows us to stop judging ourselves and others and move into this place of accepting. Accept that that is not something that they are going to do. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just the way that they're wired, and there's nothing wrong with you. It's just, if you're an artist, this is just the way you are wired. So you just and they like to be left to do things on their own time in their own way. And if you try and impose it, I watch this all the time between my sister and my mom, because my mom's an artist and my sister's a socializer, so she wants to be helpful. But with my mom, it's always like, no, well, I have to do this and it has to happen like that, and she has this her own way. And my sister gets so agitated, one, because her need to be helpful is being frustrated, but secondly, it feels like nothing ever gets done, right? Because everything is in some sort of state of process, and that's just the way it is. And so you just accept it and then focus in around it. Okay. So if we talk a little bit about the self-protective behaviors of this style, because again, if you work with someone of this style or you're in a relationship with someone of this style, these are some of the things to watch for, because again, it's indicating that their needs are being frustrated, their needs are not being met, they're not feeling satisfied. And again, as I said earlier, our behavior changes, right? When we are moving into the self-protective system of the brain, there's certain behaviors that we will automatically go to, and you want to understand those so you can be aware of, one, if this is your style that you're doing it, or if you're in a relationship with someone of this style, you become aware of the fact that they've moved into their self-protective system, and then you can work with them from that perspective, okay? They try to create their ideal relationships. I talk about that. And they'll do all the work to fix the relationship without again looking at it objectively. They'll just keep fixing it and trying harder and trying harder. One of the things that they are not very good at is they can't express their own need for space. And so what they will do is detach, or they will pick fights in order to get time alone. Okay, so that's a clear sign that you're in your self-protective system if you're picking fights so that you don't have to do something, or you get a break from people to be able to do it. Okay, they often feel misunderstood and victimized by others. Okay, and they'll use that victim type language, and they won't clarify or correct other people. Really, that idea that from that idealistic perspective, well, they should know without me having to tell them. They can withhold hurt feelings until they actually have an actual outburst, and can react really emotionally when they're giving feedback to things. They can create, notice the word create, high drama, right? So they tell themselves stories about their relationships, and they will oftentimes keep distance from other people so people can't see the imperfections that they believe exist inside of themselves. They can focus excessively on feelings and take everything personally and be really self-absorbed as a result of that. And finally, the last one I'm going to tell is they can rebel against their partner's authority, and use passive resistance or see themselves again as victims, right? And so it's just this pattern. It's normal, it's natural, it gets triggered when your needs are not being met. You shift into the self-protective system of your brain, and these are some of the behaviors that naturally will emerge that the artist style is going to use in order to try and get that need met in an unproductive way, as opposed to trying to get it met in a more productive way. And I think, some of the things that we really notice around this style is their use of language, right? And sort of the way they talk about their experiences and they talk about their situations, and, that referring back to, things that have happened. And again, always framing everything from that victim language, which ties really closely to, the victim archetype or the victim persona of the imposter syndrome. And so hand in hand, that very much is part of the self-protective style of the artist or the INFP, ISFP. So if we think about the tips for the the artist, one of the things we say is keep them focused on the issue and not on their emotions, right? They want to believe that feelings are facts, and they will pull you into discussions about how they feel about an issue rather than telling you what the actual issue is so that you can move to work with them to resolve it. Giving them lots of time, lots of freedom to themselves, to reflect, to work, to create, and remind them that it's okay for them to say, hey, and communicate their need for space and time, right? I always laugh about it because I do have, a couple of people and I can always tell when it's like, okay, there's their need for time and space, and so and sometimes they'll do it really indirectly, and so I'll just you can tell me you need me to go, or you can tell me you need a break. You can, it's okay to negotiate for that and be really upfront about it. Okay. I talked about the not asking them to conform, so think about that. And if there is a situation where you really do need them to conform from a dress perspective, let's say because it's going to be a black tie affair and how they dress and what they look like has an impact in some way, have the conversation about it, right? Don't just judge them or just don't tell them that they're doing it right or wrong, but really have the discussion up front and explain why you need it, why that needs to happen, and or why you need them to look or act in a certain way. And then they will shift and do it because they do have that ability to create. And again, they want to go after it from an ideal perspective. But if you don't give that information, then you're going to push them into that place of making them feel like they need to rebel against your authority. Okay. How long things can take with the artist can be a real source of conflict. So if you need them to comply with your schedule, give them lots of advance notice, give them reminders, be patient, provide task lists if you need to with chores, whatever it is that you need to do to support them as opposed to getting frustrated with them, okay? And really sort of thinking about expressing often what it is that you appreciate about them. And again, that going after that place of in the sort of that deep, meaningful relationship is being able to talk to those things. Remember that they have a really active, critical voice, which is always judging themselves, right? They look at themselves and measure themselves against everything else around, and they always end up coming up lacking, right? Especially when they're operating out of their self-protective system. Don't expect them to be more social than they are. Really understanding kind of they enjoy being with people, but they can become anxious, they can withdraw, they can get overtaxed, and just recognize how much energy and effort it takes for them to make small talk in groups because their preference is in deep, meaningful one-on-one against small groups of relationships. That is where they're going to be. So if you're highly social, think about having lots of social activities, think about where they need to participate and where they don't, okay? And again, try not to, if you're in a relationship with this, because again, they treat their feelings as facts, don't judge them. Don't judge their feelings. Don't tell them that they're overreacting. Don't tell them that they're being too sensitive. They can feel when they're misunderstood. They can feel when they're being victimized by people, especially those that don't empathize with them. And so consider their feelings. Try to empathize, even if that's not within your relationship style, and then get to the issue. So meet them where they are with their emotion, really empathize with the emotion they're feeling, what they're experiencing, the difficult they're having, and then move to the issue. Don't dismiss, devalue, or berate them because of what they're articulating in terms of how they are feeling in response to a particular situation.